Alright, so here are 3 jars of wort that I got from one Festikit. You can see the other video on that matter. This is the second last one I brewed. I only took off 1 jar and then I stored it in the fridge. It's colder than the other ones. That's been in the fridge for I think about 2 months, and it's in perfect condition, so it'll store in the fridge just sealed in the jar. But I'm going to can them up now in my pressure canner. The reason I have 3 from one kit and only 1 from the other is the first kit I did, I took only 1 jar out. Wasn't quite enough to prevent overflow in the fermenter. Second kit I took out 2 jars, wasn't quite enough. And this kit I took out 3 jars. I saved the first one because I didn't want to can just 1 jar. So now that I have 4 jars, I will do that. Canner has a pivot on the bottom to raise the jars up off the bottom. One thing when you're canning, make sure there's no obstructions on the lid. I use my finger. They always say to go around with a cloth, but I find using my finger does a better job because you can actually feel if there's a nick in the lid or in the rim. Like for example, if there's a nick in that rim, I can feel it, or if there's any minor obstruction hardened on there or something, I can feel it. You tighten these just finger tight. What I can do here with one hand holding onto the jar here, that's tight enough. You don't want to crank it down as tight as you can get it, because the way these work is that the 2-piece lid allows it to vent. If you have that cranked down all the way, it's not going to allow it to vent. So I put these guys in there, and then I'm going to get some water and fill it part way with water. Alright, about 2 liters, and it's not high enough yet, but when the first one goes in, I can turn this on to high. Never turn it on when there's no water in. You could melt the bottom of your pot. That makes about 4 liters. You can see it's not quite up halfway on the jar. That's probably enough as it is, but I'm going to put in a little more just to be sure. So that's about 5 liters of water I put in there now. Like I was saying, with pressure canning you don't have to cover the jars. With boiling water canning, you cover the jars with 1 inch of water. Pressure canning doesn't matter. You just want enough water so it will not fully evaporate during the time that you have it in there. So now I'm just going to apply the lid to this thing. Alright, so there's the lid. There's arrows that you're supposed to line up here. And when you tighten these screw things, you do the 2 opposing ones. There's 6 of them. So I do these 2, and as I'm tightening, I'll notice this end is up a little bit higher than that end, so I tighten it down a little bit further. Make sure that the space between the lid and the top is the same on both sides. So one gets tightened a little more than the other. Then I do 2 more opposing ones. The front is a bit higher in this case, so I turn it first and then make sure they're about the same. And then the same thing here, they're already about the same, so I tighten them the same. Give them a good tighten. So now I just wait for steam to start shooting out of here, which is going to take 10 or 15 minutes. At which point I will apply the petcock, which is the pressure regulator. This is the pressure gauge to tell me what's in there, and this is the pressure regulator. You set it at 5, or this way is 10, or if I turn it this way it's 15 psi. I'll show you that when we get there. Alright, you can't see it, but you might be able to hear it. There's a lot of steam venting out here. It's already vented for 7 minutes, which is what they say in the books. You're supposed to vent 7 minutes. I'll put that on there, and then this gauge will slowly come up to 15 psi, because I put that on the 15 setting. And after that, for canning wort, I'm happy with like 15 minutes for me, and then I turn everything off and let it come down to temperature, which takes, before I open it, I let it come down to temperature, and that takes several hours. So that's what I do, about 15 minutes for wort. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Alright, it's hissing and bouncing around there like the stereotypical pressure cooker. I just switched it off now. It's been 15 minutes, and now I'll just leave it sit for several hours until it comes down to temperature. Alright, so it's a couple hours later, and I'm just going to ooh, it's still warm, but not hot enough that I can't pick it out by hand. So I'm just going to show you here. Properly canned goods. That's some stuff from supper there. Now it's still a bit warm, so I might spoil it doing this, but I think it should be okay. Should be able to pick it up by that rim. I'm not grabbing the glass, I'm just grabbing that rim. You can see it's right off the ground. If it's properly canned, you should be able to do that. That's good to go. That'll keep for like 4 years easily, probably 5 years for making starters.